Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Right now in Warzone, every single attachment category offers something of value to a loadout, whether you're playing mid to long range, close range, sniper support, whatever the case is. And so today I wanted to go through attachment category by attachment category, looking at the optics, the muzzles, barrels, so on and so forth for this video, because we do have, yes, like 200 weapons in this game between Black Ops 6, MW3, and MW2. We're just going to be focusing mainly on the Black Ops 6 options. These are objectively the best of the three games because of course it's the current game, so they're going to push these weapons to be better to incentivize you buying the premium title, but also these are generally what comprise the overall meta now. But you can still get the same sort of concept for some older MW2 and MW3 attachment categories just by listening to how we break down each individual one. But first up here with the optics, this is by far the most preference-based category. Quite frankly, it's the only preference-based category when it comes to this, because most of these optics don't have stats outside of what they are doing for your zoom. Obviously they've got different reticles, so that's going to be a main thing, but really this is a matter of which optics are you comfortable with, which ones do you feel like you are the most accurate with. And if that answer is a Jason Armory 2 times or a Dobrik 4 times, then you rock that. What might be great for you might not work for the next person. This is largely a preference one. There are a few optics that stand out the most to me though, the Dobrik 4 time being one of those. This is just like the VOK 3 times in terms of like what it's doing visually on your gun from OG Warzone. So throwing this on like an AMAX or a Kilo honestly feels really good. The Willis 3 times is also similar to that as well. This is a nice zoom, minimal visual recoil on there too. Jason Armory 2 times is doing more of the same. So if I'm using a mid to long range gun, those are typically the main three optics I'm looking at in this category. If I'm using more of a mid to long range but also some close range, then I'm looking at something like an Oturo red dot, which is also really clean. You can have some nice T-pose-esque reticles in that after you go through and level it up. The Kepler red dot's not bad either. The Volsky reflex is another fantastic option. Then also something like a Kepler microflex, a basic red dot, would be really good there as well. So depending on if you're not using an iron sight, if you're fighting up closer to the mid-range and long range, you've got a lot of options for optics. Like I said though, really comes down to what you feel the most comfortable with. Now the muzzle category just recently got updated because outside of just the base suppressor compensator, muzzle brake ported compensator that we had originally, we now also have the monolithic suppressor as an option. And this as unfortunate as it is, because it is just exclusively a battle pass unlock for now, so you have to play quite a bit to get to that free tier. It is the best go-to muzzle option for the mid to long range. This is not something you want to be using up close though, because as you can see with its cons, this does end up hurting your aim walking steadiness, which isn't huge, but more importantly, your ADS. And oftentimes it's a pretty distinct ADS slowdown. So it'll vary in percentage by weapon, but for your close range options like your SMGs or maybe your sniper support builds, this might not always be the go-to choice. I think you have more lenience there and more room to work with on a sniper support when you're fighting at 30-40 meters as opposed to 5, 10, 20, 30 meters like you would on an SMG. So this is something that you're going to rock a lot on your snipers, your marksmans, your LMGs, your assault rifles. Not as much though on your SMGs, so just keep that in mind. If you're not rocking this though, for the close range, a base suppressor, if you're just solely focused on staying off the map, still a fantastic choice. And then just the compensator for up close. On my SMGs, I'm pretty much always rocking a compensator for the better control, just making those a lot more versatile and way more consistent for the close range. So between the suppressor, the compensator, and the monolithic, you've got the close, mid, and long range all covered there, depending on your weapon style there. Monolithic though definitely is going to be that main choice you're going to see the most out of this category. Next up, we've got the barrels. And as we go through this conversation here, quick reminder as we go through all the details here, if you enjoyed the video, you find the info helpful, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. Much love to everyone who takes the time to do so. And if you're new to this channel, you want to guarantee that on a daily basis, you are always in the know for everything going on in COD, this is the place to be. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. So with barrels here, there's really only three that get much attention here in Warzone, and that is the gain twist, the long barrel, and the reinforced barrel. The short barrel largely helping out with ADS speed and sprint to fire type benefits. Could be useful in a certain situation, and that's pretty much just when you're building out a movement build. But in most cases there, even then, that weapon is already going to be very good for movement, and like this is going to be in the case of using SMGs or really aggressive rifles. Extending out range there for versatility typically is going to be a better choice. And then the CHF barrel, also not something that does get much attention just because it's supposed to help out with headshot damage and then trade off control, which is not always great unless you're specifically only going for headshots. But you could do that by aiming naturally and then also get better stats elsewhere. So really our top three is what we're focused on here. Gain twist is an option that typically is going to be the most advantageous on weapons that already have great base ranges or snipers because of the bullet drop and bullet lead. Like in the case of an infinite one-shot headshot sniper like the HDR or the cat or something, you're going to want gain twist for the max velocity so you don't have to worry about bullet drop or bullet lead. Or if there's rifles that have crazy good range or LMGs that have crazy good range, you just need to work on the velocity stat, gain twist is going to be a main go-to there. Long barrel is particularly advantageous on close range guns like SMGs if you have the attachment spot for them, or if you're using gunfighter or whatever, because you're going to extend the fastest TTK range out a few meters, which can be the difference of winning or losing a gunfight. If your base SMG has a damage range of 14 meters, but then the long barrel extends that out to 16 or 17 meters, that few meters can be huge in a close range gunfight. So that's where you're going to see that used the most, or on weapons that have really good velocity by default, like rifles that have good velocity, LMGs that have good velocity, or snipers that need to extend the one-shot range, like the LR762 or the Frostline, the Kar 98K using the long barrel on that option as well. So just be mindful of that for the sniper category. Other than that, gain twist and long barrel is going to be very individualized per weapon, whereas reinforced is much more so a universal benefit here, because this stacked with something like monolithic is going to give you great range and great velocity across the board, which obviously are two key components for stats for every mid to long range gun in the game. This is not something you'd really ever need to use on a close range option because velocity is not going to matter in those situations, hence why long barrel is so important there. But for your rifles, for your LMGs and whatnot, reinforced typically is going to be the most balanced go-to because it's going to give you the better range and the better velocity simultaneously, both of which are not going to be as good as the individual long barrel range increase or the gain twist velocity increase, but it's going to be the best of both worlds ultimately, which is why I think reinforced typically is going to be the best barrel outside of those niche instances like with snipers. Now for underbarrels, you might have a lot, you might have a few depending on the weapon class you're looking at here, but let's be honest, these launchers, and then in the case of like the crossbow underbarrel, are very niche. You're not using those in a competitive standpoint whatsoever, so those are not really something that's ever going to factor realistically into a loadout. The first 5 foregrips though will, depending on again the type of weapon you're using. So going through one by one, each of these have their use. Vertical foregrip is definitely going to be the best for just straight up control. It's going to focus the most on horizontal recoil, which is the hardest thing to predict. So on a weapon that's got a lot of side to side and horizontal bounce, this is insanely important because it's going to make the weapon a lot more advantageous because it'll be easier to use and easier to predict that recoil pattern. So this is obviously a mainstay on a lot of my loadouts that I talk about in my videos because that control benefit is huge. Something like lightweight foregrip helping out with idle sway, and then also marksmans are more so meant for either semi-auto guns or snipers. So in this case, also snipers will have bipods at times as well. That's obviously an individual case there, but with semi-auto guns and even snipers, idle sway being very important. You don't want the weapon constantly swaying and bobbing back and forth. If you're trying to spam semi-auto, you need to be as accurate as you possibly can be for the quicker TTKs that those offers. So that's really the only use case for lightweight or marksman. Even then though, on weapons that are semi-auto in that case, if you're spamming them and they have a lot of side-to-side bounce or they have a lot of recoil, then using something like vertical typically is going to be more helpful in those cases too. So they have their use cases, lightweight and marksman do, but it's certainly not as popular as some of these other choices. Precision foregrip is going to be a little bit of a mixture there between lightweight and vertical. So that might be maybe your go-to option on a semi-auto gun. So you get a little bit of horizontal control when it's bouncing back and forth as you're spamming, and then it's not going to sway as much as well. But again, just be mindful of that. The other main option, Ranger. I use this on a lot of my SMGs or some already easy to use weapons. It's not going to offer as much horizontal control as vertical will, but it's still going to help out some there. So if a weapon has a little bit of horizontal bounce but not a ton, this could be a good option because then on top of that recoil control, you're getting some sprinting movement speed, which is why it's so good for SMGs. Going to make them more aggressive but then easier to use at the same time. Or if you're using rifles that are like more mid-range based or more versatile and aggressive, this is a great choice there too. So Ranger and vertical are the two biggest standouts here. Lightweight and precision are also pretty solid though. Extended mag is a pretty straightforward option here. Typically you're just going to go for the max extended mag unless it's just overkill, like in the case of extended 3 in some cases, like the Kilo and the XM4, they have 80 round mags. You don't always need those. You could use them. They're just going to be a little bit slower. Typically, though, you're looking for either the max magazine option for the best damage per mag and the biggest safety net, or just the 50 or the 60 round extended mag on a lot of SMGs and rifles and whatnot. The only real time you'd be interested in using something like fast mag is on snipers, because those will help out with the ADS speed and make those faster. But other than that, you're pretty much always going with the extended mags. Now, rear grip is a category that I think has bumped up a lot in use rate as of late, because all of these are doing insanely advantageous things. Every single one of these is good depending on your playstyle, and so this is much more so a situation where if you're doing a lot of jumping in your playstyle for jump shots in your gunfights, then you're going to pay attention to certain grips. If you're doing a lot of sliding in your gunfights, then you're going to pay attention to certain grips. For instance, quick draw is the best for ADS speed. So if you have a slow ADS weapon like a sniper, quick draw is going to be the go-to. If you just want a super snappy up close option, quick draw is going to be the go-to. You wouldn't really use these on like long range rifles or anything, but for close range SMGs and snipers, that's a fantastic choice. Assault grip helping out with the sprint to fire, again, going to be great on basically just versatile rifles and then SMGs or anything you're using up in the close range. That's where sprint to fire is going to be factored into the gunfight a lot. Commando is going to give you a little bit of ADS and a little bit of sprint to fire, so it's sort of the best of both worlds there. Unless you have a weapon that just has a really bad ADS stat or a really bad sprint to fire stat individually, then typically Commando is going to be that perfect sort of middle ground, much like Reinforced would be. Then you shift into ergonomic and CQB, and these are basically going to be the inverses of each other. So ergonomic is going to help out a ton with slide to fire, dive to fire, ADS, and then you're jumping ADS. Whereas CQB is going to be slide to fire, dive to fire, jumping sprint to fire, and standard sprint to fire. So if you have a weapon that needs a better ADS, ergonomic is going to be great. If you have a weapon that needs a better sprint to fire, CQB is going to be great. If you're doing a ton of slide canceling in your gameplay, though, that's where you'd want to use one of these and then use whatever one you need, obviously, for that individualized stat. So Commando, ergonomic, CQB all have their very specific use cases if you're someone who is really utilizing Omni movement a ton, whereas Assault and Quick Draw are just a little bit more straightforward. Again, though, all of these have their use and all of them are really strong. Now for stocks, there are some niche scenarios where you'll have something like a buffer weight stock available on a few specific weapons, which is going to help out a ton with recoil control, and that's certainly got its use in those situations, but that's a super rare occurrence. Not many options have that special stock. Most are going to be relatively balanced here, so something like a combat stock typically is going to help out with just general strafe and then flinch. This could be really good on a semi-auto gun, but outside of that, it's going to be sort of a minimalized advantage there compared to some of the other options. Balanced stock, I think, is what's going to stand out the most from this category, whether you're using a rifle or an SMG or even an LMG or something, because it's going to make your base weapon faster with the standard movement speed. It's going to help out with your strafe speed with the aim walking movement speed, and then also just the general strafe speed when you're using Omni movement. And then some hip fire movement is cool. That's not going to be huge, but this is going to make weapons feel more versatile and more aggressive, whether you're using an easy to use versatile rifle or an SMG, or you have an LMG that needs more movement. This is going to be a standout choice for me. Heavy stock, just focusing on flinch, again, has its uses for like semi-auto guns or snipers, but again, not going to be hugely popular in most cases. Infiltrator helping out with strafe is pretty solid as well. If you just want to focus all in on a strafe based build, that's what you'd lean towards, because that'll be doing the most there. And then light stock is movement based, but it's not going to be the most beneficial movement always, because it's going to be base movement speed, which is good, but then strafing movement speed is not your ADS. That's just when you're walking left to right and whatnot. And hip fire movement speed, again, super niche there. So a little bit underwhelming on those stats. You'll also have no stock in some cases that'll have similar pros to that. Most of the time, though, balance is going to be that ideal choice. Now, lasers are unfortunately one of the least advantageous attachment categories in this game. Most of the time, unless you're going for a very specific style of play, there's just not a use case for a lot of these. They're pretty self-explanatory as well. If you want better hip fire, if you're going for a hip fire based build, a steady aim laser is going to be great at that. The fast motion laser, if you're doing a lot of sliding or jumping in your gameplay, would be good for better accuracy there. But if you're doing a lot of sliding and jumping, hip fire in those cases is not going to be your best friend to begin with, because your crosshairs are going way out with that spread as is. So this is going to be used to make it not as bad as it should be, but it's still not an ideal way to engage, right? Tac laser here, just offering the tac stance option. If you're trying to go for a build around that, obviously that's the clear choice, but it's super niche. Strelok or Strelok, however you pronounce it, is about the only laser that actually has a use case realistically, because it's going to help out with the hip fire to the ADS transition. So if you're someone who starts shooting a lot as they're ADSing or just before they start to ADS, this is going to help out a ton with that accuracy as you start to ADS in. So this could be great for SMGs or more aggressive builds where you are doing a lot of hip firing transition into ADS. I still think there's better attachments, especially on a 5 attachment build than this, but it's certainly an option. And then target laser for the idle sway and aiming steadiness is basically exclusively good for snipers, and that's about it. But again, I also think there's better attachments just in a 5 attachment build than this. So unfortunately, lasers are just not getting used all that much. And then lastly, we've got the fire mods. And in this case, you're going to have some weapons that'll have certain conversion kits, which in and of themselves could be good, but that's more individualized. It's not really a universal, hey, this is the best attachment in the category, right? Otherwise, you're going to have more straightforward ones. The main 3 you really have to pay attention to are rapid fire, overpressured, and recoil springs. FMJ is not really that good in this game, for Warzone at least. Recoil springs is by far my favorite because it is free recoil control for horizontal and vertical. And that's huge. So if you have an attachment to use on a weapon, you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I've got 4 out of 5 or 7 out of 8. What should I use for my final one? You don't have an obvious choice. Recoil springs. Easy. Free recoil control is never a bad thing. Overpressured obviously is going to be huge for snipers, getting better velocity for the bullet drop and bullet lead. Or again, if you're trying to extend out a mid to long range weapon's velocity stat, that's going to be good there too. You'll never use this on any close range guns, so just pay attention to that. Rapid fire mostly is only good for semi-auto guns, because on full auto guns like the XM4 that I've been using as an example here, it's going to hurt your velocity, your range, your control, and your damage. That's not going to help out the TTK ultimately, but on semi-auto guns, rapid fire actually just hurts the control, and you can gain that back. So if you want to increase the TTK stat for a DM10 or a Goblin or something, then rapid fire could be really good there, but on full auto guns, it's really not going to be a great choice by any means. But that being said, that's every main attachment category that we've got here in Warzone for the main meta BO6 options, and what you got to look out for as you're building your loadouts. So hopefully this video gave you a nice little rundown of the things you may want to pay attention to as you're customizing your loadouts or tweaking things that you maybe got from one of my loadout videos or a different creator's setups that you might want to adjust more for your play style. And that being said, it's going to wrap things up. If you enjoyed the video, you found it helpful, be sure to drop a like on it. And if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.